comes as Wall Street assesses the wider ramifications of its extraordinary decision to ban users in Australia from accessing news in the row overpaying for. Bernstein analyst Mark Shmulik, however, said investors were likely to judge Facebook's stand against the legislation as prudent, given the potentially wider implications of similar moves following another big global market. While I believe Facebook said that news links only account for 4% or so of content, the danger here is contagion if other countries pursue similar legislation with broader definitions of who is a publisher. Could this spiral into Facebook paying influencers for their posts? The fall was in line with moves in other major tech shares as Wall Street largely shrugged off outrage around the company's decision to block all news content in Australians searching Facebook for news today were instead shown notifications saying no post. Attempting to share news links brought up a message saying this post can't be shared. Facebook is facing down calls for a boycott with Delete Facebook, Boycott Zuckerberg and Facebook. We Need to Talk trending on rival site Twitter as fury at the move spread. The surprise escalation of the battle over a law which would require Facebook and Google to reach deals to pay news outlets was denounced by media, politicians and human rights groups as it became clear that official health pages and emergency warnings had been scrubbed along with new. Critics blasted the decision, saying it will lead to the proliferation of conspiracy theories and misinformation, which Facebook claims to be tackled. Meanwhile, the ban also led to a host of non-news sites being blocked, including health agencies providing information on COVID, emergency services warning about fires, domestic violence shelters, charities and food bank. Facebook's fight with Australia comes amid a global push to force tech giants to pay for content, with similar laws under consideration in the UK, the EU and Facebook has flagged commercial risks around copyright and content moderation consistently to investors in recent years, while successfully riding out the public relations fallout as its advertising revenues. Along with Google owner Alphabet, it now controls more than half of the digital advertising market. The company's shares, up 33% last year even as the platform was widely criticized for its handling of hate speech and misinformation related to COVID-19, dipped 1% in pre-market trade in New York. Like others of the stay-at-home stock market winners from the past year's COVID-19 lockdowns, Facebook has soared in value and is now worth almost $800 billion. Filings show that in the past 3 months, company insiders have sold $788 million of Another analyst, Murabag Securities' Neil Campling, contrasted Facebook's PR disaster with Google's unveiling this week of a multi-year deal for news content with Australian tycoon Rupert Murdoch's News Corp. Furious Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison said the move proves that big tech companies think they are bigger than governments and that the rules should not apply to. He added, Facebook's actions to unfriend Australia Today, cutting off essential information services on health and emergency services, were as arrogant as they were disappointing. These actions will only confirm the concerns that an increasing number of countries are expressing about the behavior of big tech companies who think they are bigger than governments and that the rules should not apply to them. Share this article. Share. They may be changing the world, but that doesn't mean they run. We will not be intimidated by big tech seeking to pressure our parliament. Mr. Cicilline added, threatening to bring an entire country to its knees to agree to Facebook's terms is the ultimate admission of monopoly. Matt Stoller, of the American Economic Liberties Project, said, Facebook deleted huge amounts of important content on a critical piece of social infrastructure in order to threaten a democratic society's sovereign power. The details are complex. The underlying power play is simple. Australian politicians are currently debating new laws which would force big tech companies to compensate news outlets for stories they host them. The law, the News Media Bargaining Code, was being debated by Parliament this week, with ministers voting to approve it on Wednesday. The bill now returns to the Senate for final approval, where it is expected to, when it passes, it will become the first such law requiring tech giants to compensate publishers for hosting their content. Facebook and Google have been leading opposition to it, saying it is unworkable and unfairly targets their businesses. At one point, Google had threatened to quit Australia entirely if the law passed, but has since softened its stance and begun striking deals with news outlets. Changes to news in Australia. Facebook has restricted publishers and social media users in Australia from sharing or viewing Australian and international news. What does this mean for Australian news organisations? Australian news organisations will be restricted from sharing or posting any content on Facebook pages. Admins will still be able to access Page Insights and Creator Studio on their Facebook pages. Facebook said they will continue to provide access to other standard services, including data tools and CrowdTangle. What does this mean for international news organisations? International news organizations can still post on Facebook, but Australian users will not be able to see the content or share it. What does this mean for Australian Facebook users? Australian Facebook users will not be able to Facebook users? International Facebook users will not be able to view or share Australian news content on Facebook advertising.